Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this lecture, I will try to summarize essential points from my paper on rebuilding an Islamic society. This is for my course on Islamic economics at the Islamic University this semester. So we start with the realization that Islam created a revolution 1400 years ago. It was an amazing event. The teachings of Islam took the most backward society in the world, with ignorant and backward Arabs who lived in the Jahiliyyah, and changed them into world leaders. These people who were burying their daughters alive became models of excellence in conduct. They launched a civilization which transformed world history and gave light in all dimensions of knowledge. For 1,000 years, all aspects of social life were transformed by the Islamic civilization, which created a unique and new ways of living together for humanity, which have not been achieved before and which have not been achieved afterwards. So the question is, do these teachings of Islam, which create such a great revolution, do they have the same power today? Conditions today are very closely resembling the Jahiliyyah that was the characteristic of pre-Islamic times. There is a moral decline, the belief that might is right. If you look at the wars taking place all over the world, just power justifies the killing and destruction of entire civilizations like Iraq, Libya. Complete countries are wiped out just because the powerful have the power to do so. Nobody has any right to complain. So we see environmental degradation, inequality, all sorts of social evils. Billions are poor. Few people have more than half the planetary wealth. And nobody is, the efforts being made to solve these problems are being blocked successfully. So it was prophesied that Islam came as a stranger and will become a stranger. And this has come true. Islamic societies are very far away from Islam in all dimensions. It is also true that the Ummah is following the ways of the Christians and the Jews, as prophesied. And what is the most important part is that the Ummah is enveloped in compound ignorance, double ignorance, or jahl murakkab. What this means is that not only have the teachings of Islam been lost, but actually the Ummah believes that we have the Islam. The Ummah is under the illusion that we have Islam. This illusion that Islam is already being practiced and we already know what Islam is prevents us from actually looking at the revolutionary teaching of Islam. If we believe that we already have Islam, then we will never look to the teaching of Islam to see if they have something to offer us. So today, in all dimensions of life in Islamic societies, Western models dominate. Our political structures are designed along the parliamentary democracies of the West. Our economic systems are designed to follow those of the market societies, not original Islamic structures. Our societies are patterned after Western societies in many, many ways. Our educational systems, we follow Western systems of education. Our judiciary follows the laws that the West, the legal system that the West has devised. Even purely Islamic institutions, we don't have any counterparts in the West, like madrasa, masjid, waqf, and even family, neighborhood, and ummah. These are no longer in their original authentic Islamic form. The madrasas only teach a small collection of subjects, supposedly purely Islamic, whereas our original Islamic educational institutions taught everything. All of the knowledge was considered as one, an integrated whole. Similarly, the masajid were strong social community centers which held the heart of the neighborhood together. The family ties are becoming weaker because of the effect of Western theories and media of individualism, hedonism, pursuit of pleasure, social irresponsibility. The Waqf was designed to be the institution which took care of social welfare, and for 1,000 years all social welfare needs, education, marriages, orphans, everything was met by the Waqf. But today the Waqf are inactive, dormant, and have lost their effectiveness and power. What can we do to change the state of affairs? Efforts are needed on two fronts: the internal, the spiritual, the human being, and the external, the world we live in. It can be called the effort of the night and the effort of the day. The night effort, we work on our relationship with God, and in the day we translate this relationship into action in concrete reality. This has also been called the Makki effort and the Madani effort. In Makkah, Prophet ﷺ worked on building people, and in Medina he worked on building institutions. It can also be called the effort on ourselves and on the external world. But in Islam we don't have sequencing, in the sense that first you build the person, then you engage with the world. Actually, we have simultaneous effort on both fronts. We engage with the world in order to develop our personality, our character, and make spiritual progress. We spend money to purify our heart of the love of money. That's why Allah Ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. We spend of the things that we love. This helps other people, but it also cleanses our hearts. So the simultaneous effort that the world is also changed, but our hearts are also changed. Both of these efforts are required simultaneously. So there are many signs of the decline of the West, and many signs of the emergence and growth of Islam, and the signs of revival of the Deen. Coordinated efforts, because all of the fronts of Islam, all of the dimensions of Islamic societies are corrupt, are no longer in their Islamic form, because Islam has become a stranger. So a massive effort on multiple fronts is needed, and actually multiple efforts on multiple fronts are in fact taking place. Although these efforts are separate and they don't have a combined vision, but actually all of the parties working together are actually working together for the revival of Islam. So there are two basic paradigms for change which Muslims are using, and parties for reform and movements for reform are using. One of them is the evolutionary paradigm, that we take what we have and we make small changes to it, and we move towards the ideal form. And the other is the revolutionary paradigm, that the current system is so corrupt, so bad, so far removed from Islam, that it is impossible to change from it and to take small steps to convert it into a real Islamic system. So the only solution is to just destroy it all and build a new system from scratch. I'm saying both of these methods have serious deficiencies, and a third method is needed, which I will try to explain in this paper. So obviously, to go into a little bit more detail, evolution is the practical approach. It is pragmatic. But the problem with this approach is that the institutions we are working with are not neutral. If they were neutral, you could transform them into Islamic ones. But actually, institutions are the concrete representations of social goals. So there is a spirit behind the institution. Like the bank represents the spirit of accumulation of wealth. So you can change the shape, but you cannot change the spirit. Similarly, social institutions are actually embody the values of a society. So you cannot make small changes to the form and change the heart and the underlying value. Furthermore, another problem with creating change one step at a time is that all of these different social institutions are linked together and they work together. So you cannot change one piece of the system because it will not work with the other pieces. So that means that the evolutionary strategy, one step at a time, will not be successful. So then the alternative is to create revolution, just change everything all at once. But even this is a serious problem, because while we can certainly destroy the existing system, and revolutions have been launched in Afghanistan and Iran, what to do next is not clear. What would the shape of an Islamic system be? Taliban came to Pakistan to ask the ulama about how to build a new banking system, how to build an interest-free economy. And the truth is that nobody really knows. The same thing exactly happened in Iran when Khomeini was asked that how should we go about building an Islamic economics, an Islamic society. He did not have any clear ideas, and as a result, the Irani economy is very much like a capitalistic economy. So when we don't have a clear goal, then just destroying the existing system takes a lot of energy and effort and sheds blood, and this effort is wasted because we don't know what to do next. There are three models for change which are represented in our tradition. One is the Deoband, which is very strong on tradition, and there's Aligarh, which is making huge concessions to modernity, and there's Nadwa, which was started out with the principle that we will stay firm on the fundamentals, and we will make ijtihad on the furu, on the branches. And this is really the ideal form, that yes, stick to the fundamentals of deen, but follow ijtihad on those areas where we are free to do ijtihad. But the problem, although this is the ideal approach, this has not been very successful because of a number of reasons. One of the main ones is that we have been brainwashed into believing the superiority of the West. So we tend to adopt many aspects of Western civilizations which are actually very bad. So even if there is room for us to adopt them, we should not adopt them. But the effort to build a compromise has failed because we have failed to be sufficiently discriminating about the Western civilization as to what to take from it and what not to take from it. So the solution that I would suggest is that there are many grounds on which we can build, which are very clear and which are unopposed. So if we start working on those doors which are open, so taking those opportunities which are there, then we will acquire the strength to make further progress. One of the key problems is that Western civilization prizes outcomes over process, and so we have also come to think in that way. So revolutionary thinking is really an outcome-oriented thinking. It says that launch a revolution, create an Islamic society, and then the institution, and then Islamic society will emerge. And before the revolution, nothing can be done. So one outcome must be achieved, and after that we will start the work that is needed to be done. For the moment, all effort must go towards launching a revolution. This is a wrong way of thinking, because Islam is not outcome oriented. Islam does not ask us to achieve success in this world on some external grounds. Islam is very process oriented. It asks us to struggle with the current environment in the best possible way in order to please Allah. Outcomes are in His hand. So when we struggle, maybe we will win, maybe we will lose, maybe we will become shaheed in the process. This is not asked for us. This is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to look at the current situation and to do what the orders of Allah Ta'ala ask us to do. And in this process of engagement, the outcome, it is the inner outcome, the spiritual progress, our connection with Allah that matters. So in a way, this is aligned with the evolutionary approach, that we have to look at what is the current situation and then we have to struggle with it in the best possible way to move it towards the ideals of Islam. But achieving the revolution is not the goal. The goal is actually the process. The effort to make the change will create a change in our hearts and in our souls and will give spiritual progress, and that is the goal. Whether or not the system changes, whether or not the outcome occurs, whether or not revolution occurs is not relevant for us. Only the fact that we made the effort to be part of the change, that is what matters, and that is what we will be asked about. So in order to make an effort for change, we have to have some idea of what is the ideal system that we are trying to achieve. So even though achieving the system is not required, we need to have a goal in order to direct our efforts. So for this purpose, it's important to understand the nature of the problem we face. Islamic institutions existed for 1,000 years, but they have been destroyed by the process of colonization of the world. The waqf, the education, the family, the masjid, all of these have been deeply affected by the colonization and by the Western education, which teaches us the wrong lessons about the purpose of our lives. So these institutions do not exist, but we cannot just go back 300 years and take the existing institutions as they were 300 years ago and launch them today. We cannot change the times, and we cannot go back to even the original Medina society and say that just take, or they used dirham and dinar and they used camels, so let's just start riding on camels. No. What we have to do is we have to look at what would have happened if Islamic society had been in existence, and if this society had persisted and continued and evolved and changed, then these institutions would be in their current form. That is what we're trying to achieve. So if you look at, for example, Western banking, it is continuously evolving and changing, and there were rules like Basel I, and they were updated to Basel II and Basel III. So just like that, the Islamic institutions too would have evolved and changed to meet with the needs of modern times. So we cannot go back and take a 300-year-old model and apply it today and hope that it will work. Because what we are looking for is the institution that would have come into existence if that institution had changed and evolved. So what we need to do is something difficult. We have to make an imaginative adaptation. We have to think about what that institution would look like today. This requires a lot of creative effort and ijtihad. So basically, there is a story that I tell that of a soldier who went to the grave of his sheikh, and this was in the Turkish fight with the Greece, and he asked his sheikh to rise up from the grave and help fight the kuffar who were coming in and invading the Muslim lands. So the sheikh rose up from the grave and gave the soldier a slap. He said, look, we fought our own wars and you have to fight your own wars. You can't expect us to fight your wars for you. And this is exactly our problem today, that we have the principles of Islam, But we have to solve our own problems. We cannot go and look at how solutions 1,000 years ago, how the early Muslims solved their problems. They made the ijtihad that was appropriate to deal with Roman and Egyptian and Indian and Greek institutions and knowledge. Today we are faced with a different set of problems. We have the same set of golden rules, fundamental principles which will never change throughout time, which are perfect and complete for our guidance, but how we will use them to deal with our modern situations, this is a problem which we have to solve on our own. There are many institutions that we have devised today which are actually responsive to the needs of the time. The institution of Tabligh and Dawah today, there is nothing like that in the past of Islam. The institutions of Madrasa today, there is nothing like that in the past of Islam. And similarly, there are many political parties and many efforts and many different fronts which do not have any resemblance to what used to be the past. So these are actually creative responses, taking Islamic principles and applying them to solve today's problems. So we have to recognize that these new institutions have to be planted, which are adapted to modern times and strengthened, and once these institutions grow together, they will provide the building blocks for what we are trying to do. So basically we have to work on creating institutions which are Islamic in nature and adapt to the modern world, and which can thrive in the modern environment. And there are many opportunities once we know how to look in the right direction, once we're not engaged with the effort of smashing down the system. Instead, we look at the wide open grounds which don't conflict with any area, which don't arouse any opposition. And when we build on that open grounds, then we will acquire strength and knowledge and guidance to do the remainder of the task, which will have to be done eventually. So one of the important lessons for this purpose to build these new institutions is that there are 72 branches of faith, and so all of these branches need work. And so the Quran advises us to cooperate in doing of the good and to not cooperate in doing of the evil. So the house of Islam is very large and it contains many different departments. So let all of and no one can do all of the jobs at the same time. So let different parties do their jobs and recognize each other as partners instead of competing with each other or fighting each other and saying that, okay, my work is the only work and all other works are wrong. No, all 72 departments need work, and all of them, and the different branches may be very different from each other. So specialization is needed. There will be groups who will be doing zikr, there will be groups which will be doing the education, the madrasas, there will be groups which will be doing tabligh, there will be groups which will be doing politics, there will be groups which will be doing social welfare. All of these are important, essential elements of the deen, and they are all working together in a larger sense. So we need to consider that these are all our partners, and we need to stop fighting each other, because division in the Ummah is one of the greatest obstacles to progress. But the biggest obstacle is one that I have not mentioned, and this is that the process of colonization is actually a conquest of minds. And this is perpetuated by a Western education. And this is designed to create shock and awe of the West and contempt and hatred for our own selves and our heritage. And this is really the greatest obstacle to progress. Today, the Ummah as a whole thinks that progress lies in following the lessons of the West and acquiring Western knowledge. And if you look at how the children are being educated, everyone is learning the educational models of the West so that they can make money and have careers. And the meaning of prosperity is to have more money, because that's how the West defines it. And so the whole Ummah is engaged in an effort to increase the GDP per capita and how to become people who can earn a lot of money, how we can participate in the ongoing economy. And instead of working on those fronts which Islam teaches us, which is how to build human beings. So the Western education has shaped our minds in ways which are against Islamic teachings. And this is really this software, this reprogramming of minds, this is the biggest obstacle to progress. What is needed is unlearning and deprogramming. How can we unlearn the lessons that we have learned from the Western education? And how can we get rid of the inferiority complex that has been created by colonization and conquest by the West? This requires effort on many fronts, but one of the important fronts is called the archaeology of knowledge. We have to look at the roots of European thought, because this thought is actually what has dominated our minds. How the Europeans think, this is how we want to think, and this is what is being taught in our schools and colleges. And this thought is actually very harmful and poisonous. So in order to understand how this, to actually disenchant our minds, to cleanse our minds, we have to understand how this thought emerged in Europe itself. We have to do one of the jobs that is needed to be is what Ghazali did, the Haft al-Falasfa. In his time, the Greek knowledge was dazzling the minds of the Muslims, and the Mu'tazila said that we have to accept Greek philosophy as being on par with Wahi. So Ghazali did the intellectual task of showing that this Greek philosophy is all wrong, and most of it is made of mistakes and errors, and some parts we can take. The same task is needed today. Today, the Ummah is dazzled by the brilliance of Western knowledge, and they just want to accept everything that is coming from the West without analysis or examination. And this is the greatest obstacle on our path to understanding the teachings of Islam. So a lot of effort is needed to show the errors and the defects and the weaknesses of Western intellectual structures. We also need to rewrite history, because the Eurocentric history that we have been taught teaches about the glory and the power of the West, and teaches of the inferiority and the submission of the East. So this has to be changed by an alternative history told from the point of view of the losers. This requires creating counter narratives. Instead of portraying the glory and power of the West, we have to rewrite history by showing that we were a peaceful civilization and barbarians came and invaded us, just like happened in the fall of Baghdad to the Mongols. So the recent conquest of the West is similar. It was not that an advanced civilization conquered an inferior civilization. In all characteristics of civilization, we were actually far ahead of the West. But they had the weapons, and they had the power, and they had the philosophies of conquest which allowed them to conquer. So the looting of the world and the acquiring of riches and wealth, which is the characteristic of the West, is now considered to be the good thing by us, that the way to progress is to acquire more wealth. So we have to re-establish the purpose of our civilization, which was to make human beings, to achieve excellence in conduct and character. And many different myths have been planted in our minds by the British as part of their campaign to conquer, and these were the divide and rule narratives. So a lot of fights taking place among Muslims today, Iraq, Iran, Shia, Sunni, Hindu, Muslim, all of these have been created by false narratives that the British have told in order to follow their divide and rule strategy. By making us fight each other, it makes it easy for them to rule over us. And this is what is happening today. So, if we are able to overcome all of these obstacles, then we can turn towards the building blocks of an Islamic society, which are generosity, cooperation, social responsibility. These are the opposite of the current economic structure, which is based on greed and on competition, on everyone for himself, individualism and hedonism, love of luxury. Instead of pursuing the more and higher standards for our own selves without any regard for anyone else, Islam teaches us to serve the creation, to seek nothing for ourselves but to seek to serve others. And we need to create institutions which give shape to these abstractions. And we need to understand that the real effort and desirable outcomes occur on the spiritual front. If we make progress, if we build our character, if we acquire the love of Allah, if we acquire the love of the creation of Allah, and we serve them for the sake of the love of Allah. These are the internal changes that Islam calls for, not the external changes, not the success, not the revolution in this world. So the revolutionary teachings of Islam are embodied in the model for excellence, which was the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he provides us with the example of what we need to do. And the thing he did was to build human beings. He did not build human resources. He did not create change. But he made people realize is that our life is short and we have a purpose. And the purpose in this short life is to please Allah. He taught us that all men and women are brothers and sisters. All of the creations is the family of God. Power is given to us to serve the weak and help the weak, not to oppress them. Wealth is given to us so that we can share it with those who are needy. The leader of the people is the servant of the people. These revolutionary messages of Islam are still revolutionary today and just as strange to the West as they are to Muslims today. So the Islamic teachings are meant for the welfare and prosperity of all mankind. This message, how we can learn to be human beings, is something which is needed by the whole world today. There is no opposition to the message that let us learn to have good character, let us learn to improve ourselves as human beings. So these are the grounds which are uncontested, and these are the grounds on which we can build. And these are the grounds on which we were meant to be the leaders of the mankind. But instead of creating personalities and instead of following the lessons of Islam, we are trying to follow the lessons of the West and trying to acquire more power and more wealth and more worldly goods. And that is why we have the role of leadership of the world, which is designed for us, has been taken away from us. And this leadership of the world still awaits us if we can just follow the example of the Prophet. If we can learn to be human beings, the world is waiting for this model. So, in the words of Iqbal, सबक फिर पर शुजाअत का, सदाकत का, अमानत का, लिया जाएगा तुझसे काम दुनिया की इमामत का. That is, if we learn how to be good people, if we learn how to be models of human excellence in human conduct, everyone is waiting to follow us. So thanks. This is the end of this lesson.